The new Yankee Stadium has opened in the Bronx. I went to a game Saturday, and it's a much friendlier place for anyone trying to eat healthfully and maintain some environmental awareness. When I entered the park, I stopped at the produce stand, and bought a couple of fresh pears. Later I went to the noodle bowl stand where for $8.50 I got a bowl of noodles, veggies, and tofu. Tofu at the ballpark. The snack was listed on the menu board at 240 calories. All the food choices have calorie counts posted now, so you can avoid or still indulge in the almost 1,100 calorie Moe's Home Wrecker Burrito at La Esquina Latina. I also had a caramel apple, which as junk food goes, is still pretty good. Every few yards you find a trio of disposal cans for regular trash, plastic, and compost, which you may actually have items for with a produce stand on site, and which may eventually foster a garden in which more fresh vegetables take root for the home team.
As you've probably heard, the US is in the midst of an obesity epidemic. Americans just keep getting fatter and fatter. But the bad news doesn't end there, because in today's issue of the New England Journal of Medicine, scientists from Harvard and the University of California, San Diego report that obesity is actually contagious, and it seems you catch it from your friends. After analyzing 32 years' worth of data from more than 12,000 individuals, the researchers found that thin people tend to cluster with thin people, and not just for warmth, and that people with more mass tend to gravitate toward one another too. But it's not that folks seek friends with a similar physique, or that people who pack on the pounds all frequent the same fast food franchises or avoid the same gyms. What the scientists think is happening is that as those around you start plumping out, you come to think that being a bit hefty isn't such a bad thing. Then as you become larger, so do your friends, and your friends' friends, and their friends as well. The good news is that losing weight should also make your friends lighter. So order the salad, and skip dessert. Believe me, your friends will be glad you did. A book a day may keep dementia away, even if you read it as a kid, because a study finds that exercising the brain, at any age, may preserve memory. The work appears online in the journal Neurology. Previous studies have shown that engaging in brain-building activities is associated with a delay in late-life cognitive decline. But why? Does flexing the old gray matter somehow buffer against age-related intellectual impairment, or is cognitive loss simply a consequence of the aging brain's physical decline? To find out, researchers questioned nearly 300 elderly individuals about their lifelong participation in intellectual pursuits, like reading books, writing letters, and looking things up in the library. Then, every year for an average of 6 years until they died, the subjects took tests to measure their memory and thinking. What the researchers found is that folks who worked their mental muscles, both early and late in life, remained more intellectually limber than those who didn't, even when a post-mortem look at their brains revealed the telltale signs of physical decline. So if you're headed to the beach, don't forget a hat and a book, both to protect your head.
Back in ancient times, philosophers like Aristotle were already speculating about the origins of taste and how the tongue sensed elemental tastes like sweet and bitter, salty and sour.
What we discovered just a few years ago is that there are regions of the brain, regions of the cortex, where particular fields of neurons represent these different tastes again. So there's a sweet field, a bitter field, a salty field, etc.
Nick Reba, a sensory neuroscientist at the National Institutes of Health. Reba and his colleagues found that you can actually taste without a tongue at all, simply by stimulating the taste part of the brain, the insular cortex. They ran the experiment in mice with a special sort of brain implant, a fiber optic cable that turns neurons on with a pulse of laser light. And by switching on the bitter sensing part of the brain, they were able to make mice pucker up as if they were tasting something bitter, even though absolutely nothing bitter was touching the tongues of the mice. In another experiment, the researchers fed the mice a bitter flavoring on their tongues, but then made it more palatable by switching on the sweet zone in the brain.
What we were doing here was adding the sweetness, but only adding it in the brain, not in what we were giving to the mouth.
Think adding sugar to your coffee, but doing it only in your mind. The results appear in the journal Nature. Reba says the study suggests that a lot of our basic judgments about taste, sweet means good, bitter means bad, are actually hardwired at the level of the brain. And as for that virtual sugar in your coffee idea,
I think it's basically science fiction to think that this would be something that would be applied to humans.
But today's science fiction might be tomorrow's artificial sweetener.
The early Earth's oceans were home to a lot of interesting chemistry. Now scientists have found that amino acids thought to be present way back when could have been cooked into other compounds vital for life, an idea you should take with a grain of salt. 4 billion years ago, the planet was probably covered by a salty ocean dotted with volcanic islands and short-lived continents. German researchers recently mimicked some of the chemistry taking place along the coasts of the volcanic islands. They created an approximation of primordial seawater. Then they evaporated it to simulate what went on at those volcanic coasts. They baked the residue, creating salt crusts. At those high temperatures, amino acids interacted with metal ions in the salt crusts and were converted into other important biological molecules such as pyrroles, which are part of the structures of chlorophyll in plants and hemoglobin in animals. The scientists presented their findings September 17th at the European Planetary Science Conference in Potsdam. Over hundreds of thousands of years, these novel compounds could have built up along the volcanic coasts, creating materials for the first living cells, which were really worth their salt.
Most of us know we should rein in our energy use, but to be successful, it'd help if we knew the best way to do it. So scientists asked more than 500 people, what's the most effective thing you can do to conserve energy? The results were illuminating. More than half the participants focused on conservation by curtailment, switching off the lights, changing thermostat settings, and driving less. Only 12% went for efficiency, using compact fluorescent bulbs, insulating the house, or driving a hybrid car. But scientists say that it's actually these moves that yield the bigger energy savings. The results appear in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The study authors think that a big factor is that curtailment's easier to imagine doing, while efforts to improve efficiency would involve, for example, doing research about new appliances or cars, and spending money up front to buy them. But if people knew more about the actual energy requirements of their activities versus the savings available through efficiency, they might be spurred to act. To quote physicist and energy expert Arthur Rosenfeld, energy efficiency is like a Saudi Arabia under our cities.
The traveling salesman problem is a favorite math conundrum. If a salesman has to visit a bunch of cities, how do you get him to all of them once via the shortest possible route? But the traveling salesman's predicament pales in comparison to figuring out the best ways to get four-man crews of umpires to every Major League Baseball game. A research team attacked the problem for the last few years. Their solution appears in Interfaces. It's a journal of operations research. In addition to minimizing travel, here are some of the umpire constraints. Crews should visit each MLB city at least once. They should work each team at home and on the road. They should not work more than 21 days in a row. They should not ump any one team's games for more than 4 series all year. There are plenty more. The researchers first had to develop the question dubbed the traveling umpire problem. They used brute force computation and heuristics for their solutions. The result was good enough for Major League Baseball to adopt the last 3 seasons. Previously, a former umpire made the schedule. That guy is out.